The evening light filtered through the large living room window, casting a warm golden hue across the room. I sank into the well-worn leather sofa, staring at the muted television screen. The usual evening routine had become almost a ritualistic process over the years. The same shows, the same commercials, the same conversation topics. It was comforting in its predictability, but also unbearably monotonous. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner, a white noise that had become as familiar as my heartbeat. I could hear the faint clinking of dishes from the kitchen, where Julie was preparing dinner. I had to admit that despite the repetitiveness of our lives, there was a certain solace in the stability we had built. Julie, with her meticulous routines and her gentle smile, had been the cornerstone of my world for the past decade. Our life together was like a well-oiled machine. Every cog and wheel in place, every task scheduled and executed with precision. The morning routine was predictable. I would wake up to the smell of coffee brewing, and Julie would be there, already dressed and ready to start the day. We would exchange the same pleasantries, kiss each other goodbye, and go about our respective workdays. The evenings were often spent in the same manner: dinner, followed by a few hours of television or reading, and then to bed. We didn't argue often. In fact, we rarely fought. Our disagreements were typically minor and resolved with little more than a few exchanged words. The lack of conflict was perhaps both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it spoke to the ease of our relationship and the respect we held for one another. On the other hand, it suggested a certain level of complacency, an acceptance of the status quo that left little room for excitement or spontaneity. Julie was the kind of person who thrived on routine. She found comfort in the familiar and was resistant to change. Her daily rituals were a testament to her desire for order and predictability. Whether it was her meticulous grocery shopping list or the way she arranged the books on our shelves, everything had its place. And I had always respected that about her, even if it meant that our life together often felt like a well-rehearsed play rather than an adventure. We had met in college, during a period when our lives were full of promise and possibility. We were young and idealistic, believing that our love would overcome any obstacle, and for a time it did. Our early years together were filled with laughter and excitement, but as the years passed, the initial fervor gave way to the comfort of routine. It wasn't that we were unhappy, far from it. We were content, even if our contentment was tinged with a sense of inertia. We had our routines, our shared interests, and our mutual respect. But there was a certain yearning, a subtle sense that something was missing, a question that had begun to nag at the back of my mind. Julie had recently made a decision that would shift the dynamic of our lives, though at first, I had been unaware of its full impact. She decided to enroll in film school, a choice that seemed to invigorate her with a new sense of purpose. It was the first major change in our routine in years, and while I was supportive, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a new hobby for her. The prospect of her pursuing her dreams was exciting, and I admired her courage. But as the weeks went by, the changes became more pronounced. Julie was spending more time away from home, attending classes and working on projects. Her enthusiasm was palpable, but it also left a void in our daily life that I struggled to fill. As she delved deeper into her film studies, I found myself grappling with the new reality of our relationship. The evenings we once spent together now felt empty, the familiar rhythm of our life disrupted by her absence. I had always enjoyed the predictability of our routine, but now, with Julie engrossed in her new venture, I felt adrift. The once predictable evenings were now filled with an unsettling silence. I would sit alone in the living room, the television providing little solace as I contemplated the changes in our lives. The comfort of routine was replaced by a growing sense of uncertainty, and I found myself questioning whether our stable existence had been enough, or if we had both been craving something more, something that had eluded us. As I watched Julie immerse herself in her new passion, I couldn't help but wonder if the very stability that had once defined our life together was now becoming a source of discomfort. It was clear that the status quo was shifting, and with it, the balance of our relationship. The stability we had cherished was now being challenged, and I was left to navigate the uncertain waters of our evolving life together. The first day of film school arrived, and Julie was a whirlwind of excitement. As I watched her get ready, I could hardly recognize her. She moved quickly around the house, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Her outfit was carefully chosen, a chic professional dress that she had picked out specifically for this occasion. "Can you believe it's finally here?" Julie asked, her voice practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "I'm so excited," I nodded, trying to match her energy. "You'll do great," I said, offering a supportive smile. Julie left for school, her step lighter than usual. The house felt unusually quiet without her. I found myself checking the clock, eagerly waiting for her return. When Julie finally came back, she was practically glowing. "Today was incredible," she said, her eyes wide. "The campus is amazing, and everyone I met is so passionate about film. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Her excitement was contagious, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and envy. Her first day had been everything she had hoped for, and it was clear that this new adventure was going to be transformative for both her and us. Julie's enthusiasm for film school had reached new heights by the end of her second week. She'd mentioned a charismatic instructor named Alex in passing, but it wasn't until I met him that I understood why he had such an impact on her. I decided to drop by the school to pick her up after her class and was introduced to Alex, who was waiting by the door. Alex was immediately striking, tall, impeccably dressed, and exuding a magnetic confidence. His presence commanded attention without effort. His dark, wavy hair and piercing blue eyes gave him an air of mystery that seemed almost cinematic. When he spoke, his voice was smooth and authoritative, yet approachable, a blend that resonated with Julie and her classmates. As we exchanged pleasantries, I noticed how Alex's gaze lingered on Julie with a genuine interest. His compliments about her work were heartfelt and specific, highlighting her potential in a way that was both encouraging and flattering. Julie responded with an eagerness that revealed how much she admired him, her excitement almost palpable as she spoke about his teaching style and insights. The interaction left me with a mixed feeling of admiration and unease. Alex's charisma was undeniable, and it was clear why Julie found him so compelling. As I watched them, I couldn't shake the feeling that this magnetic instructor was becoming a significant figure in her life, perhaps more than I realized. The first sign of change was subtle, almost imperceptible. Julie's routine had always been predictable, but now there were small deviations that I couldn't ignore. She started arriving home later and later, often with a vague excuse about needing to stay after class for extra practice or project meetings. At first, I attributed it to her increased workload, but the pattern soon became more apparent. Her once frequent calls and texts during the day became sporadic. When she was home, her mind seemed elsewhere. Conversations that were once filled with the minutiae of her day now consisted of curt updates or hurried responses. I noticed her enthusiasm for film discussions had shifted to a preoccupation with specific projects and meetings with classmates I had never heard of before. Our evenings, which used to be spent together in the comfortable routine of dinner and television, now felt hollow. Julie would often retreat to her study or the bedroom to work on her assignments, leaving me to fill the void. I could hear her typing away on her laptop late into the night, her presence in the house reduced to a mere shadow of what it once was. The change in Julie was not just about her physical absence, it was emotional as well. She became more distant, and her responses to my questions were often curt and detached. The warmth and connection we once shared seemed to evaporate, replaced by a form of aloofness that left me feeling isolated. One evening, as I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, I couldn't shake the sense that something fundamental had shifted. Julie's new routines and interests had become a wall between us, and I was left grappling with a growing sense of unease. The vibrant, engaged person who had excitedly started this new chapter had changed into someone I struggled to connect with, and it was clear that something was missing from our relationship. The growing distance between Julie and me was becoming impossible to ignore. I began to notice more and more subtle signs that something was off. It wasn't just the late nights or the sudden preoccupation with film school. It was the little things that didn't quite add up. Julie's behavior had shifted from enthusiastic to distant, and my once steadfast trust began to waver. It started with her phone. Julie had always been open with her phone and its contents, but recently she had begun to take it with her everywhere. The screen was frequently face down, and she would quickly turn away if I happened to glance at it. It wasn't like Julie to be so secretive, and the sudden change in her habits piqued my curiosity. Her interactions with me were becoming more strained. The warmth in her voice was replaced by short, distracted responses. Even when she was home, her mind seemed preoccupied. She would frequently lose herself in thought during our conversations, as if she were mentally somewhere else. I tried to bridge the gap by initiating more conversations and planning activities, but she would often brush them off with a polite but detached demeanor. I also started noticing how Julie would often mention a group of film school friends who were keeping her busy. While I was happy that she was making connections and finding support, the frequency with which she brought them up seemed excessive. She talked about them with an intensity that bordered on obsession, and it made me uneasy. One evening, I decided to follow her to see where she was spending her time. I waited until she left the house and drove a short distance behind her, my heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and determination. She pulled up to a small cafe, where she met with Alexei, the film instructor. They greeted each other with a familiarity that struck me as more than just professional. I watched from a distance, my suspicions growing as I observed their interaction. This clandestine meeting was the final piece of the puzzle, confirming the fears I had been trying to ignore. The afternoon had started like any other, until an unexpected encounter turned it into a moment of revelation. I was at a local bookstore, trying to distract myself from the growing unease at home. As I browsed through the shelves, searching for a new read, I was startled to see Julie's film instructor, Alex, on the opposite side of the aisle. He was poring over a stack of scripts, his tall frame unmistakable. I hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to approach him, but curiosity and a strange sense of obligation pushed me forward. I cleared my throat and introduced myself, attempting to sound casual despite the anxiety twisting in my gut. Alex looked up, his blue eyes meeting mine with a warm, genuine smile. "Oh, Michael, right? Nice to meet you," he said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm and confident, and his demeanor exuded an easy charm that was both disarming and unsettling. We exchanged pleasantries about Julie and her progress in the film program. Alex spoke with a level of enthusiasm that was palpable, his eyes lighting up as he discussed her work. But it was the way he spoke about her, how he praised her creativity and dedication with such personal admiration, that made my skin crawl. There was a familiarity in his tone that suggested a deeper connection than mere student-teacher rapport. As we continued to chat, I couldn't help but notice the subtle glances and the way their conversation seemed to carry an undercurrent of intimacy. It was as though there was a private joke or an unspoken understanding between them, something that went beyond the professional boundaries I had hoped existed. The conversation ended too quickly for my comfort, and as Alex walked away, I was left standing in the bookstore with a knot in my stomach. The encounter had confirmed my growing suspicions about the nature of Julie's relationship with him. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and it was clear that this was no ordinary student-instructor dynamic. The realization left me feeling more anxious than ever, my mind racing with questions about what was happening between them. The subtle shifts in Julie's behavior began to reveal themselves more clearly over the weeks. It was as if she was deliberately leaving breadcrumbs, hints of her growing admiration for Alex and the work they were doing together. At first, it was small comments during dinner or casual conversations, but they quickly became more frequent and pointed. One evening, as we sat down to eat, Julie excitedly recounted the details of a recent project. "Alex has such a unique vision," she said, her eyes lighting up. "The way he approaches storytelling is so inspiring. I feel like I'm learning so much from him." Her voice was filled with enthusiasm, and though she mentioned her admiration in passing, the intensity behind her words was hard to ignore. Her discussions about the film school and her classes were now dominated by anecdotes about Alex. She often spoke of his insights and critiques with a reverence that bordered on adoration. "Alex had this great idea for our next project," she'd say. "He knows how to push us to think differently." Each mention of his name seemed to carry an extra layer of excitement, almost as if she were savoring the opportunity to share her experiences. Julie also began to incorporate Alex into our plans, suggesting that we attend film screenings or events that were somehow connected to him. "Alex mentioned this great film festival coming up," she said one evening. "I thought it might be interesting for us to go together. It could be a lot of fun." It struck me as peculiar that she would make such suggestions, considering we had never discussed attending film events before. The most revealing moment came when Julie excitedly showed me a list of upcoming film projects and workshops. Among them was a note about a special seminar hosted by Alex. "I've signed up for this seminar Alex is hosting," she said, practically glowing. "It's supposed to be amazing. I'm looking forward to it." The way she spoke about him, almost as if he were the focal point of her excitement, left me with a sinking feeling. The subtle hints were accumulating into something I could no longer ignore, and the underlying affection she had for Alex was becoming increasingly apparent. The mounting suspicions that had been gnawing at me were finally confirmed one fateful evening. I had been growing increasingly uneasy about Julie's frequent absences and the way she spoke about Alex, but nothing prepared me for the full reality of what was happening. I was driving home from work when I noticed Julie's car parked outside a cozy, dimly lit cafe in town, a place I knew she frequented with Alex. I decided to park nearby and observe from a distance, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Through the cafe's large windows, I could see Julie and Alex seated at a corner table. They were engrossed in conversation, their body language revealing a level of intimacy that went beyond a professional relationship. Julie laughed at something Alex said, her hand brushing against his in a way that was far too casual for mere friends or colleagues. As I watched, my heart sank. Alex leaned in closer, his hand resting lightly on Julie's arm. She didn't pull away. Instead, she seemed to lean into the gesture, her eyes locked with his in a gaze that spoke volumes about their connection. The flirtatious glances and the way they touched each other with an ease that was both familiar and intimate were impossible to ignore. The scene inside the cafe played out with a painful clarity. They seemed completely absorbed in each other, their conversation punctuated by laughter and shared moments that felt deeply personal. The chemistry between them was electric, a stark contrast to the distant and strained interactions I had been experiencing with Julie. As I sat in my car struggling to process what I had just witnessed, the reality of their affair hit me hard. The evening's encounter was more than just a series of flirtatious gestures. It was a full-blown romance. The realization that Julie and Alex had crossed the line from professional respect to a personal affair was a blow I hadn't been fully prepared for. As I drove away, my mind was reeling with the painful truth of their relationship and the uncertain path that lay ahead. The realization of Julie's affair left me reeling, but I needed concrete evidence to fully understand the extent of her betrayal. I began to look for tangible proof, hoping it would help me make sense of the disheartening reality I had discovered. One evening, when Julie was out late for what she claimed was a group study session, I took the opportunity to search her study. My heart pounded as I went through her desk drawers and personal items. It was in a small, hidden compartment of her drawer that I first found something unsettling, a collection of handwritten notes and messages from Alex. The notes were affectionate and personal, filled with terms of endearment and references to private moments they had shared. Each word was a painful reminder of the emotional connection they had developed. As I continued searching, I discovered a small box tucked away behind some books. Inside, several items confirmed the depth of their relationship. A bracelet with an engraved charm, a small framed photo of Julie and Alex together, and a few cards with intimate messages. The bracelet was particularly telling, as it was something that Julie had never mentioned receiving, and its inscription was unmistakably personal. The final piece of evidence I stumbled upon was Julia's phone, which was left unlocked. I hesitated for a moment before opening her messaging app. The conversations between Julie and Alex were filled with flirtatious remarks, plans for future meetings, and expressions of affection. Reading through them, I felt a wave of betrayal and sadness wash over me. Their exchanges were not just casual flirtation, but revealed a deeper emotional and physical connection. Holding these pieces of evidence, the weight of the betrayal felt heavier than ever. The tangible proof of Julia's affair with Alex was heartbreaking, and it confirmed what I had feared. The personal notes, gifts, and messages painted a vivid picture of a relationship that was far more than I had imagined. As I sat in the quiet of our home, surrounded by the evidence of her infidelity, I was left grappling with the painful reality of the situation and the uncertain future that awaited us. The weight of the evidence I had uncovered felt almost unbearable. I knew I had to confront Julie, lay bare the painful truth, and address the betrayal that had been eating away at me. I waited for her to come home, my mind racing with the right words and the right approach, but knowing that nothing would truly prepare me for the confrontation. When Julie walked through the door that evening, she seemed her usual self, completely unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. I asked her to sit down in the living room, and as she settled on the couch, I could see a flicker of curiosity and apprehension in her eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice as I began. "Julie, we need to talk," I said, my voice taut with suppressed emotion. I've found some things that I need to discuss with you, things that make it clear you've been seeing someone else. I watched her face carefully, noting the subtle change in her expression as she began to piece together the gravity of the situation. She shifted uncomfortably, and the defensiveness in her posture was evident. Michael, she started, but I cut her off before she could offer any excuses. I pulled out the notes, the bracelet, and the messages from my bag, placing them on the coffee table in front of her. Julie's eyes widened as she took in the evidence. Her breath hitched, and for a moment the room was filled with a heavy silence. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and resignation. I didn't want it to come to this, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, I've been seeing Alex. I'm so sorry. The admission was like a punch to the gut. I felt a torrent of emotions, anger, sadness, and betrayal all crashing over me at once. Julie's eyes were brimming with tears, but her attempt at a remorseful look did little to alleviate the pain I was feeling. How could you do this? I asked, my voice trembling. How could you let it go this far? Julie struggled to find the right words, her apologies coming out in fragmented sentences. She spoke of how Alex had been a source of inspiration and support, but her explanations only seemed to deepen the wound. As she continued to speak, it became clear that the emotional and physical connection she had with Alex was something she hadn't been able to control or fully understand. The conversation ended with a heavy silence between us. Julie's tears and apologies were a stark contrast to the cold reality of her betrayal. As I sat there, grappling with the enormity of what had just transpired, I knew that our relationship had been irrevocably altered. The path ahead was uncertain, and the pain of the confrontation was just the beginning of a long, difficult journey to come. The days following the confrontation were a blur of pain and confusion. Trust, once the cornerstone of our relationship, had been shattered, and the sense of betrayal lingered like a heavy fog. Each interaction with Julie was tinged with a tension that I couldn't shake off. Our conversations, once comfortable and familiar, had become stilted and strained, marked by unspoken grievances and a deep sense of disillusionment. Julie's attempts to make amends felt hollow. She showered me with apologies and assurances, but each gesture was a painful reminder of the trust that had been broken. I could see the earnestness in her eyes, but it did little to mend the rift that had formed between us. Her efforts to reconnect felt like a bandage over a gaping wound, insufficient and temporary. Our home, once a haven of shared experiences and mutual understanding, now felt cold and alien. Simple tasks, like having dinner together or watching TV, became fraught with underlying tension. The intimacy we once shared was replaced by an uncomfortable distance, and even routine conversations seemed to carry an undercurrent of resentment. Every word felt weighted with the history of what had happened, making it difficult to find solace or normalcy. The impact on my emotional state was profound. I found myself questioning everything about our relationship, the foundation we had built, the future we had envisioned. Each time I looked at Julie, I was reminded of the betrayal, and the once clear path to our future now seemed clouded and uncertain. The doubt gnawed at me relentlessly, making it hard to see a way forward. As the days turned into weeks, the strain of living with the betrayal began to take its toll. I became increasingly withdrawn, my mind constantly replaying the events that had led to this point. I grappled with the decision of whether to try to salvage what remained of our relationship or to accept that the trust had been irrevocably damaged. The future, once full of promise, now appeared as a daunting and ambiguous landscape, leaving me to navigate through the wreckage of our shattered trust. The tension in our home reached a breaking point, and Julie knew it was time to address the elephant in the room with full transparency. One evening, she asked if we could sit down and have an honest discussion about everything that had happened. Despite my reluctance, I agreed, hoping that maybe, just maybe, some clarity would emerge from this painful situation. Julie began by recounting the emotional state that had led her to her affair with Alex. She spoke of feeling disconnected and uninspired, both in her personal life and in our relationship. I felt like I was missing something, she explained, her voice trembling. Alex was there for me in a way that I didn't realize I needed. He made me feel valued and understood. As she spoke, I struggled to reconcile her words with the reality of the situation. Her explanations, while heartfelt, did little to justify the betrayal. She spoke of the emotional support Alex provided, and how his encouragement and shared passion for film had ignited a spark in her. But every explanation was a reminder of how she had sought solace outside of our relationship, rather than addressing our issues together. Julie also admitted to feeling a sense of complacency in our marriage, a realization that had hit her hard. "I didn't know how to talk about my dissatisfaction or how to fix it," she confessed. "Instead of seeking help or working through it with you, I made a terrible mistake." Her words were filled with regret, but they also highlighted a failure to address the underlying problems in our relationship. The conversation shifted to potential solutions, but the path was fraught with uncertainty. Julie proposed couples counseling as a way to rebuild what had been lost. "I know it won't be easy," she said, "but I genuinely want to work through this. I want to understand what went wrong and how we can fix it." Her offer was sincere, yet I remained skeptical. The idea of therapy seemed like a necessary step, but whether it could mend the deep wounds was uncertain. We discussed the possibility of a trial separation as well, to give us both space to reflect on our needs and the future of our relationship. Julie agreed that this might be a necessary step to gain perspective. "We need to figure out if we can come back from this," she said. "A separation might help us see things more clearly." Throughout the discussion, I remained emotionally guarded, struggling to balance the desire to salvage our relationship with the deep hurt that still lingered. Julie's explanations and proposals were a start, but the process of healing would be long and arduous. As we ended the conversation, I knew that while there were potential paths to resolution, the journey ahead would be fraught with emotional challenges and uncertainty. The days following our heartfelt discussion were laden with tense anticipation. Julie and I were grappling with the weight of our decisions, both of us fully aware that the choices we made would irrevocably shape our future. The possibility of either rebuilding our relationship or ending it loomed heavily over us, casting a long shadow over our interactions. Julie had been proactive in her efforts to address the issues that led to the affair. She had enrolled us in couples counseling and was making a genuine effort to communicate more openly about her feelings and our problems. Despite her actions, however, the emotional distance between us was palpable. I found it challenging to fully engage in the process, my trust in her remaining fragile. The counseling sessions were a mixed experience. They provided a structured environment to discuss our feelings and explore the reasons behind our issues, but the progress was slow and often painful. We delved into our past interactions, uncovering patterns of miscommunication and unmet needs. Julie's explanations about her emotional state and the reasons behind her affair offered some insight, but they did little to repair the deep-seated hurt I felt. As we continued our sessions, I wrestled with the decision of whether to invest further in the relationship or to accept that the damage might be too profound to overcome. The prospect of reconciliation was daunting. It required confronting painful truths, rebuilding trust from the ground up, and committing to a process that promised no guarantees. I wondered if the emotional effort needed to restore our bond was worth the potential for future happiness. On the other hand, the idea of ending the relationship was equally difficult to contemplate. The prospect of separation meant not only the loss of our shared history, but also the uncertainty of navigating life apart. It was a decision fraught with its emotional turmoil, the fear of starting over, and the sadness of losing a once cherished partnership. After weeks of counseling and intense reflection, we sat down once more to discuss our future. Julie's eyes were red from tears, her voice shaky as she spoke. "I understand if you feel that you can't move past this," she said softly. "I want you to know that I am committed to making things right, but I also understand if you need to let go." I took a deep breath, my heart heavy with the weight of our shared past and the uncertainty of the future. "I've thought long and hard about this," I began, trying to steady my voice. "I see the effort you're making, and I appreciate it. But trust is something that takes time to rebuild. I'm not sure if we can get back to where we were, or if we can find a new way forward." We both knew that the path we chose would not be easy. The decision to continue working on our relationship or to part ways was not one we could take lightly. It was clear that our future together hinged on whether we could find a way to mend the deep cracks in our foundation, or if it was time to acknowledge that our journey together had reached its end. After a long and emotionally draining discussion, we reached a tentative decision. We agreed to take some time apart, allowing ourselves the space to reflect and gain perspective on what we truly wanted from our lives. This period of separation was intended to give us both the opportunity to evaluate our feelings, understand whether reconciliation was truly possible, and make an informed decision about our future. As we embraced this difficult decision, the weight of our choice was palpable. The future was uncertain, and the path ahead was fraught with emotional challenges. Yet despite the pain and complexity of our situation, there was a glimmer of hope that, in time, we might find clarity and a renewed sense of purpose, whether together or apart. The aftermath of the affair left a profound mark on my life, reshaping my understanding of trust, love, and personal boundaries. As Julie and I embarked on the journey of healing, whether through our efforts to rebuild our marriage or by navigating the painful reality of separation, I was forced to confront the deep impact of the betrayal on every aspect of my existence. Initially, the process of trying to salvage our relationship was an emotional roller coaster. The counseling sessions, while providing valuable insights, often felt like a battleground of conflicting emotions. Each session unearthed new layers of hurt and misunderstanding, making it clear that rebuilding trust was not a straightforward endeavor. The road to recovery was fraught with moments of frustration, doubt, and occasional breakthroughs. Julie's sincere efforts to mend the rift were met with my internal struggles and fears, making the process both challenging and painfully slow. Living through this period required a significant emotional investment from both of us. The constant effort to communicate openly and work through the underlying issues tested our patience and commitment. I found myself grappling with lingering questions and insecurities about the future of our relationship. The sense of betrayal was not something that could be easily erased. It lingered like a shadow over our interactions, reminding us of the pain we had endured. On the other hand, the period of separation brought its own set of revelations. The time apart provided a much-needed space for reflection and personal growth. It allowed me to evaluate my own needs, desires, and the role I wanted Julie to play in my life. I began to understand more clearly what had been lacking in our relationship and what changes were necessary for me to move forward, whether with Julie or on my own. This time away also offered the opportunity to focus on my healing and self-care, helping me to regain a sense of individual identity that had been overshadowed by the turmoil of our marriage. As we approached the end of our separation period, we faced the critical decision of whether to resume our relationship or part ways permanently. The decision was not easily made. Julie and I had both changed during this time. Our experiences had shaped us, and the person I had become was different from who I was before the affair. We had to consider whether our relationship could be rebuilt on a foundation of renewed trust and understanding, or if it was time to accept that our paths had diverged. Ultimately, the choice was made to part ways. It was a decision filled with sadness, but also a sense of acceptance. The realization that our relationship, as it once was, could not be fully restored, allowed us both to move forward with a sense of closure. We acknowledged the growth and lessons we had gained from our experiences, accepting that while our time together had ended, it had been a significant part of our lives. In the months following the decision, I began to rebuild my life. The journey was one of self-discovery and healing. I focused on personal goals, rekindled friendships, and explored new interests. The process of moving forward was gradual and sometimes painful, but it was also marked by moments of hope and renewal. The experience taught me valuable lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and the importance of self-awareness. As I reflect on the impact of the affair, I understand that it reshaped my perspective on relationships and trust. The journey through betrayal and healing was a profound experience, one that highlighted the complexities of human connections and the strength required to navigate them. While the scars of the past remain, they serve as reminders of the lessons learned and the growth achieved. Life after betrayal is not about erasing the past, but about embracing the future with a deeper understanding and renewed sense of purpose. The aftermath of betrayal is a crucible of transformation, and for both Julie and me, it has been a period of profound personal growth. Our journey through the wreckage of our relationship has not been without its challenges, but it has also provided us with invaluable lessons about ourselves and each other. The experience has left an indelible mark, shaping our perspectives and guiding us toward new understandings of love, trust, and self-worth. For Julie, the affair and the subsequent process of reconciliation were catalysts for deep self-reflection. She confronted her vulnerabilities and the reasons behind her actions. The emotional upheaval forced her to reevaluate her desires and the dynamics of our relationship. Through counseling and introspection, Julie learned the importance of addressing her needs and communicating openly, rather than seeking validation or solace outside of her partnership. The journey was one of significant personal growth, and she emerged with a greater awareness of her strengths and weaknesses. Our decision to part ways was a difficult but necessary step for both of us. It was a recognition that while we had shared a significant part of our lives, the path forward required us to acknowledge our individual needs and the changes we had undergone. For Julie, this meant a renewed focus on her personal goals and relationships. She began to forge a new path, one that allowed her to build on the lessons learned from our time together and pursue a future that aligned with her true self. For me, the experience of betrayal was a profound test of my resilience. It forced me to confront my vulnerabilities and question my understanding of trust and commitment. The process of rebuilding my life post-affair was not just about moving on, but about redefining my sense of identity and purpose. I learned the importance of self-care and the need to set boundaries that protect my emotional well-being. The journey was marked by moments of painful reflection, but also by the discovery of newfound strength and clarity. The separation period provided me with an opportunity to focus on my growth and aspirations. I reconnected with friends and family, pursued personal interests, and worked on building a life that was fulfilling on its terms. The experience taught me that while relationships are a significant part of life, they do not define one's entire existence. Embracing this realization allowed me to approach the future with a renewed sense of hope and optimism. The lessons from this experience have reshaped our understanding of what it means to be in a relationship. We both learned that trust is a fragile and precious component of any partnership, one that must be nurtured and respected. Betrayal, while devastating, also provided us with insights into the complexities of human connection and the importance of honest communication. As we move forward in our separate lives, the experience of betrayal has left us with a deeper appreciation for the value of personal growth and self-awareness. It has taught us that healing is a process that requires both time and effort, and that the journey through adversity can lead to a more profound understanding of oneself. In the end, while our paths diverged, the experience brought with it a sense of closure and acceptance. We learned that while we cannot change the past, we can shape our future with the lessons we have gained. The scars of the past remain, but they serve as reminders of the strength and resilience we discovered within ourselves. Our lives have been irrevocably changed, but the journey has also paved the way for new beginnings and a renewed sense of purpose.